heard the story of the school uniforms that came to life? This is the chilling story of the killer uniforms that once haunted the grounds of Bernadette Heights. It all happened so many years ago at Bernadette Heights, which was a prestigious all-female boarding school known for its academic excellence and discipline. It was a place where prestigious families enrolled their daughters to stand out in the community. Back then, female children were not largely educated, as only a selected few were allowed to go to school, and Bernadette Heights turned out to be the people's choice. Little did they know that Bernadette Heights held a very dark secret that no one dared to speak about. All the students of Bernadette Heights, as well as its teachers, lived in constant fear and anxiety, haunted by some evil uniforms that was said to roam the dark halls of the school at night. No one dared to be out in the halls by midnight, not even the matron of the school, who always ensured that her doors and windows were locked. Whilst the students slept, the killer uniforms roamed the halls, looking for anyone who dared to cross their paths. One night, shortly after night prep, a senior student named Ebere gave her uniforms to a junior student named Oge, asking her to iron them. "Do not dare return if you fail to iron my uniforms," Ebere warned Oge, who quickly rushed to the ironing room to iron the uniforms. On getting there, Oge met a long line of students who were hurriedly ironing their uniforms, eager to finish and get back to their dorm rooms before midnight. Oge waited in the queue, which did not seem to move as quickly as she anticipated. As the clock ticked closer to 12, Oge grew increasingly anxious. She glanced at the old clock on the wall, its hand slowly moving towards the dreaded hour. She knew the stories, the terrifying tales of what happened to anyone caught in the halls after midnight. Oge stood there patiently as her turn finally arrived. Just as she reached the front of the line, she noticed the lights flicker. The other girls in the room, filled with so much terror, scampered for their lives as they rushed out of the ironing room to their dorm rooms. Oge, afraid of what Senior Iberi would do to her if she failed to iron her uniforms, quickly began to press the uniforms, her hands trembling as she moved the iron quickly, straightening all the folds and creases on the uniform. Oge could feel goosebumps run down her spine as she stared up at the clock, realizing that she only had 10 minutes to get to her room. By the time she looked down at the uniform, Oge realized that she had burnt the uniform. Her eyes widened in terror to see the scorch marks on Senior Iberi's uniform. Oge, in that moment, found herself stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. It was already 5 minutes to midnight, and Oge knew that if she did not return to her dorm room, the killer uniforms would surely find her. However, as she stared at the burnt uniform, she knew that Senior Iberi's wrath would be just as terrifying. So, she began to panic as she pondered on what to do. Tears filled her eyes as her heart began to race. Time was now running out, and Oge decided to make a run for it, hoping that she arrives her dorm room before midnight. No single soul was in sight, and just as Oge ran, she saw the lights flicker as the hallway suddenly became cold. Everywhere plunged into complete darkness, making it difficult for Oge to see. Terrified, she stumbled forward, her only thought to get back to her dorm room safely, but the darkness seemed to thicken around her, making it hard for her to see. As she ran, she felt something cold and soft brush against her arm. Oge gasped and looked down to see one of the cursed uniforms floating beside her, its empty sleeves wrapped around her legs as she began to cry. "No! Please, no!" she cried out for someone to help her. Anyone. Her screams echoing in the halls as all the other students cringed in fear as they lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. knowing fully well that they could not save her. Suddenly, everywhere went silent, and by morning, the students nervously crept out of their dorm rooms, whispering amongst themselves about the events of the previous night. They slowly made their way towards the spot where they last heard Oge's terrified screams, expecting the worst. But when they arrived, they found nothing. There was no sign of Oge. The hallway was empty, save for the burnt remains of Senior Ebere's uniform lying in a crumpled heap on the floor. The students looked around in confusion, their eyes wide in fear as they searched for Oge. Oge! They called out repeatedly, their voices trembling as they called out to her, but Oge was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, and everyone began to panic, realizing that she was gone, just like Dimma, who disappeared a few months ago and was yet to be found. The school authorities, as usual, caught wind of the information and quickly debunked the news, warning the students to desist from spreading false information or face being expelled from the school. They informed the students that Oge ran away from school, but as much as everyone tried to believe their narrative, they all knew the truth but dared not to speak of it. Ebere was now engulfed with guilt, knowing that a terrible fate had befallen Oge because of her. However, she was too scared to do anything, knowing that her life would be ruined if she was ever expelled from Bernadette's Heights. Her father only agreed to send her to school because he hoped that she would find a rich husband once she was done, and Ebere could not ruin her only chance at a better life away from her controlling father. As the days passed, the students found it hard to get over Oge's disappearance. They all wondered what really happened to her, and in hushed tones discussed what could have possibly happened. Ebere, unable to bear the weight of her guilt any longer, decided to pay a visit to Sister Onyinye, the school's matron, who lived alone at the entrance of their dormitory. She knocked on the door of her house, trembling in fear as she prepared to confess everything to her. But when the door opened, Sister Onyinye looked at her as though she knew all that had happened. "Sit down, Ebere," she said to her in a low and calm voice. "I know why you are here," she said to Ebere, who froze in shock and stared at her matron, who told her that Bernadette's Heights had always been a place of secrets. "You are not the first to face such a burden, and you won't be the last," she said to Ebere, who sat there, looking dazed as she listened to Sister Onyinye speak.
Bernadette's Heights is buried in secrets. So many people have gone because the authorities have decided to cover everything up, claiming that the students ran away. The killer uniforms are becoming more aggressive, and if nothing is done soon, they will come for all of us,
she said to Ebere, whose heart raced as she listened, her stomach twisted with fear and curiosity. Sister Onyinye could sense the fear in her and knew that she had to stop. Ebere's heart was weak, and Sister Onyinye knew that the truth would plunge her into more fear, so she encouraged her not to be afraid and sent her back to her classroom, urging her not to speak to anyone about the incident. Ebere returned to her classroom, terrified, as she dreaded the coming of nightfall. Oge's screams were still ringing in her ears, terrifying her very being. Sister Onyinye sat in her room as she thought of what to do. She could not let what was coming consume everyone, knowing what happened so many years ago when she newly joined the school. It happened so many years, on one night when Sister Onyinye was in her room alone. It was midnight and she heard a very loud scream in front of her house. It was the cry of a student, and Sister Onyinye watched as the killer uniforms dragged the students into the school cafeteria. She was too terrified to leave her room, but by morning, she rushed to the cafeteria to check on the students but found no one there. She was so convinced that the killer uniforms took the students to the cafeteria but wondered where the students could be. All she knew was that the killer uniforms were vengeful spirits who roamed the halls of the school at night. No one ever spoke of the spirits or why they were haunting their school. Just as Sister Onyinye was about going to bed, she heard a knock on her door. It was past midnight, and Sister Onyinye knew that no student would dare to be out by this time of the night. She tried to ignore the knock, but the knock persisted, terrifying her with each sound of the knock. Sister Onyinye summoned the courage to ask who it was, and the voice revealed to her that it was Oge. Oge? She asked shockingly. She rushed to open the door, and a headless uniform crawled into her room. Sister Onyinye opened her eyes and mouth in terror, as she never expected to see a headless uniform. "I am not here to harm you," Oge said to Sister Onyinye, who stood there frozen as she listened to all Oge had to say. Oge then narrated to her the entire story of Bernadette's height and why the killer uniforms were on rampage in the school. It all happened so many years ago, when a very rich chief decided to set up an all-girls school. The rich man was married to a young woman who was not opportune to go to school. Her family was extremely poor, so they gave out their daughter's hand in marriage to the rich man. After they got married, the rich man saw that his wife was so timid, so he decided to enroll her in school to gain some exposure. However, all the schools around were mixed, and he could not risk his young wife being in the midst of young boys and men because of how beautiful she was. So he thought it wise to establish an all-girls school of his own, where his wife could complete her education. His wife Adanna, alongside other female students who enrolled in the school that year, were the first set of students that the school ever had. Everyone knew that Adanna was the wife of the founder of the school, and this caused a lot of ruckus as everyone acted differently around her. All Adanna wanted was to be treated like any other student in the school, so she pleaded with her husband Chief to allow her live in the school like all the other students. Chief at first refused, but seeing the point she raised about being able to concentrate better if she lived in the dormitory as the other students, made him succumb to her wishes. That was how Adanna began to live in the school dormitory like a normal student. What she did not know was that the headmistress of the school had always had eyes for Chief. Chief and the headmistress were childhood friends who grew up together in the community. At a point, this was when they were much younger, the headmistress believed that Chief would marry her, but this did not happen, as Chief ended up marrying his first wife, who died of a brief illness. After his first wife died, she came around again, comforting him with the hopes that Chief would notice her this time. But Chief paid no mind to her and decided to remain single for so many years. Unable to wait any longer, she decided to move on and married a very poor man who ended up sick for most of their time together before he died, making her a widow. A few years later, Chief approached her with the proposition of running his school. She realized in that moment that Chief was setting up the school because of his young wife, who he was so protective about. This made her so jealous to see a young girl with Chief, so she decided to take revenge. One evening, whilst Adanna was about heading to the cafeteria, the headmistress stopped her and invited her to her house. She told Adanna that Chief had dropped off some food for her earlier and urged her to follow her to her house to eat the food. Adanna was so shocked to hear this because Chief always ensured that he saw her whenever he came visiting. The headmistress, seeing her suspicious face, told her that Chief did not want to disrupt her class, hence why he dropped off the food with her and left. Adanna smiled to see that Chief was finally adhering to her wishes of treating her like a normal student. She happily followed the headmistress to her house, and the headmistress gave her a flask full of food to eat. It was her favorite meal, so Adana did not hesitate to eat the food in a hurry. After taking a few spoons, Adana felt a very sharp pain in her stomach. Blood was now gushing from her mouth, and Adana immediately knew that something was wrong. Before she knew what was happening, she fell to the ground and died. The headmistress waited till nightfall and chopped up Adana's body and gave it to the school cafeteria to cook for the students to eat. All the students ate up a piece of Adana without knowing it, as the headmistress stood back and watched. By the time anyone knew that she was missing, the deed had already been done. Chief paid a visit to the school and was told that Adana was no longer in school. She left the school premises yesterday evening, the headmistress said to Chief, who wondered where his wife could have gone. After weeks of unfruitful search, everyone concluded that she ran away, not knowing that she was dead and gone. Her restless spirit cried out for help, but no one could hear her. So she began to roam the school halls at night in a uniform that once flattered her human body, hunting those who partook in the eating of her flesh. The spirits of those that she killed also turned into killer uniforms, terrorizing the students of Bernadette's Height. The evil headmistress, on seeing all that was happening, paid a visit to a juju man who gave her a charm to make the restless spirits to hunt only the students of the school instead of her. Sister Onyinye's eyes opened in shock to hear the terrifying story. Oge went on to reveal to her that the charm buried by the headmistress was responsible for the anger that Adana's spirit felt that made her roam the halls of the school every night to capture the students. She told Sister Onyinye that the charm had to be found and destroyed, or else the death will not stop. Sister Onyinye was so confused as she pondered on where the headmistress could have buried the charm. She asked Oge, who informed her that the charm was buried under the old orange tree at the far end of the school's compound, near the cafeteria. The tree had been there for years, but no one ever paid much attention to it, as it was located in a secluded part of the school's grounds. Oge's voice, although hollow and distant, pleaded with Sister Onyinye that the charm had to be destroyed soon, because in 2 nights, the spirits will no longer be bound to the halls. They will haunt the entire school, and this will lead to a lot of deaths. Sister Onyinye's heart raced as she absorbed Oge's words. She knew time was running out and had to act fast. Terrified at the revelation, she asked Oge what she must do to destroy the charm, and Oge informed her that she had all it took, and that was why she decided to speak with her. Pray and burn it, or else the entire school will be doomed. With those final words, Oge's presence faded, leaving Sister Onyinye alone in her small room, shaking in fear. The next morning, Sister Onyinye sent for Ebere. She knew she could not do this alone and decided to confide in Ebere, who was still wrestling with guilt over Oge's disappearance. Ebere, Sister Onyinye said in a hushed tone as they met in her quarters, "There is something you must help me with. It concerns Oge and the killer uniforms." Ebere's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. "Oge? What do you mean? Sister, is she alive?" Sister Onyinye shook her head solemnly. "Oge has passed, but her spirit came to me last night. She revealed the dark history of this school and what we must do to stop the killer uniforms and free their souls." Ebere, although terrified, nodded her head in agreement. She knew that she had to help, not just to rid herself of the guilt, but to save the other students from the same fate. Sister Onyinye told Ebere everything that transpired, saying that they had to find the charm and burn it before the restless spirits consumes them all. Ebere nodded as they both headed to the side of the tree. With trembling hands, they began to dig beneath the tree. the soft soil, turning over easily under their shovels. After several hours of digging, a buried shovel hit something hard. It was a small wooden box, sealed and covered in dirt and roots. Inside was the cursed charm, bound together with an ancient rope. "Quickly," Sister Onyinye whispered, her voice barely audible. "We must burn it now." They placed the charm on the ground, and Sister Onyinye began to say some prayers. Ebere joined her fervently as they both prayed for some minutes and burnt the charm, which went up in flames before their eyes. A loud piercing cry was heard as the restless souls of Adanna and all the other spirits she had claimed were finally set free. Onyinye and Ebere could sense an overwhelming sense of peace and knew that the curse had finally been broken. They stood there in silence as they watched the last of the fire burn out. It was over. Adanna's spirits and the others had finally found peace, and Bernadette's Heights would no longer be haunted by the killer uniforms. That night, the school seemed different, lighter, as if the air itself was free of the dark history that had plagued it for so long. The headmistress, oblivious of all that had happened, went about her activities as usual, but Sister Onyinye and Ebere knew the truth of what she had done. Sister Onyinye then decided to inform Chief of all that happened to his wife, Adanna. She knew she could no longer keep the secret, especially after all the lives that had been lost, including that of his wife, who he believed had run away. So, Sister Onyinye paid a visit to Chief, who was now old and frail. He never recovered from Adanna's disappearance, and the mystery had haunted him for all these years. When she arrived his home, he welcomed her with weary eyes, curious about her sudden visit. "Chief, there is something I must tell you," Sister Onyinye began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It is about Adanna and what really happened at Bernadette's Heights all those years ago." Chief's eyes widened in shock as Sister Onyinye recounted the tragic events, the headmistress's jealousy, the poisoned food, the grisly fate of Adanna, and the curse that had plagued the school ever since. At first, Chief sat in silence, unable to comprehend the horror of what he was hearing. The woman he had entrusted with the care of his young wife had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Adanna had not simply disappeared, she had been murdered and turned into an unknowing instrument of revenge. Tears filled Chief's eyes as Sister Onyinye recounted the story. "We have been able to break the curse," she said softly, assuring Chief that Adanna's spirit, as well as the other souls she had claimed, had been set free. "We could not continue without telling you the truth," she said to Chief, who remained silent for a while, trying to process all that he had heard. With a trembling voice, Chief thanked her for telling him the truth. "Although it is painful, I am grateful to finally know the truth. Adanna deserves so much more than what she suffered, and it pains me that I couldn't protect her," Chief said, with sadness in his voice. Over the coming weeks, the truth about Bernadette's Heights was brought to light. The school administration, including the headmistress, could no longer hide behind their lies. The headmistress was removed from her position and brought to justice for her role in the event. The bodies of the students were never found on the school grounds, and everyone wondered what could have happened to them. Chief, determined to preserve Adanna's memory, funded a memorial on the school grounds, a beautiful garden in her honor, where students could come and reflect. Bernadette's Heights continued as a school, but it was no longer haunted by the cursed spirits of the past. The story of the killer uniforms became part of the school's history, passed down to the students as a reminder of the dangers of jealousy, betrayal, and unresolved pain. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not let our jealousy lead us into destroying the lives of others. Covering up a truth can seem like the best decision to take in certain situations, but then repercussions can be more damaging than revealing the truth. The school authorities chose to cover up the disappearances and misdeeds, allowing the curse to grow stronger. It was only when the truth was revealed that the curse was broken and the spirits were set free. This teaches us that hiding the truth for personal or institutional gain can have severe repercussions. I hope you enjoyed the story.